now working from a pretty detailed roadmap of how we intend to turn our technology into the highly valued products that customers are ready to buy. We have a timetable for how that's going to unfold. What we've got to dig into now is what is the motivation that customer has to actually buy your product. And we're going to do that by looking at all the options that they're going to be looking at, trying to get inside of their brain and look back at what you're offering. Up till now, when we've evaluated our impact on the customer's P&L, for example, we only compared it to their status quo. What we have to do next is compare it to everything they might choose to disturb their status quo. What is the full set of options that they have as they respond to this pain? And that's going to be important for a couple reasons. One, if this unmet need is really as important as you think it is, and is as high value as you think it is, then there are going to be other people out there who are aware of it. Remember, a while back we talked about how flat the world is and how visible all these opportunities are across the globe. You aren't the only person aware of it. And so we've got to be doing our homework to try and sniff out what else might be out there or might be out there soon. So the competitive landscape is going to be changing. We have to be better at understanding that competitive landscape than anybody else if we're going to win. So that's one dynamic we're going to worry about. The other is, if they were just sort of fat, dumb, and only slightly unhappy until you pointed out that something could be done a lot better, it might wake them up to go look at more options than they were looking at before. So we better do our homework so we know what they're going to find out when they go and look. Hey, what's possible? Somebody just called me up and said I could do this better. So here's how we help you tackle that. We've again invented a kind of graph that you need to write. So the point of this graph is to capture the range of solutions that are available to solve the problem you say you're the best at. And so now that you've had a lot of time trying to decipher and understand what customers are saying, then you're going to understand usually what they will tell you about is some kind of a trade-off they're having to make. Now, since it's different in every case, we again have to invent the axes of this graph. On our y-axis, going up the left side, we want some expression that makes sense to the customer about a value-based performance criterion. So I get so much of this per dollar, something that really matters to them. What we're really looking for is then, when they get more of that, what are they usually giving up that they care the most about? Because there's often trade-offs between two things. And what we'll find, and this red line on the graph describes, is the trade-off that most of the marketplace is dealing with. And so if you knew every solution that they could look at, it would probably arrange itself around this curve. It's called a curve of compromise. So what is that main trade-off? And if we get our axes right, then two things will happen. This value per dollar performance against some other performance criterion that's important to the customers, well, first of all, will make a lot of sense to the customer. It's what they're dealing with. And secondly, the range of competitive offerings that are out there, including the one they're currently choosing, will probably arrange themselves along that curve. Now, what the work of Altshuler tells us in this methodology called trees is that the level of innovation that anybody accomplishes is best described as the amount of separation that new solution creates between that ongoing curve of compromise and the new answer. So this blue winning solution cloud to the upper right is where we want to play. Well, your solution is what it is, and it does what it does. So part of this is finding out, where is there a high need where I am clearly differentiated? It may not be exactly the market you said you were going to go after, at least maybe not first, maybe it's not so pronounced there, But somewhere, that is a very distinctive solution. So when we take the time to figure out how and where we create a big step upward where somebody can get two things instead of just one, then we found the area where we can compete in a very distinctive way. That's what we're looking for. We want to be high and to the right of this graph, and I can tell you this, you can always invent criteria that's going to put you high and to the right of your graph. The trick is when your customer base that you're trying to sell it to looks at that graph, you want them to rip it out of your hand and say, oh my gosh, really? That's exactly the problem I'm dealing with, and I have to have more of both of these, and that's why I want you in here next week. So that's how you know when you've got it right. It has that resonate, the customers resonate with it, and they say that is exactly the trade-off I've been forced to make, and they'll often respond to you then with saying, well, if you can do that, I want in. I'll write you the provisional purchase order right now if you can't deliver it. If you're just testing the market, let me know. When you got it, I want it. And if you have the ability to then get intellectual property about the very thing that separates your solution from the rest of the market, then you've got a sustainable competitive advantage. And that's where the gold is. When you can create something the customer will tell you, this is the key issue for me, and you can protect it, then you're in the right place. Now, there's a little bit of a trick here. You have to tune what you're doing to each of those customers. If you go back to that product technology roadmap and you look at all those customer groups that you put up in the top, they're not all going to think the same. They don't all have exactly the same trade-off they're having to make, and maybe all of them need some form of your know-how, but it may be different. So you've got to tune this until each of those customers get to that reaction. Now, clients I'm guiding, I would encourage to reorder them when they're done and say, you know what? The one where I can make the biggest difference, I'm going to go after that one first. Now, there are other criteria that we're going to use, but that's one of them, is where can I make a profound difference and sustain it? So what did that competitive analysis tell you about how you need to describe your product? You're not going to use this information necessarily to tell you what is your product, but you want to be able to describe it in the terms that those customers are thinking about when they are evaluating that series of options. Each of those arrows represents an entire marketing, sales, delivery, and payment collection plan. And what you need to start thinking about is, what are all those implications? How is that going to happen? When we come back, we'll dig into that in the next lesson, where we'll capture this path going forward in actionable terms, creating goals.